Welcome to the Week 14 wrap up here at this 13th season of Blood, Sweat, and Beers, our regular season wrap up. Before I go any further, Zach, I think you're still muted. It's the little button that looks like a microphone. That way we can all hear what you have to say. But looking back on the final regular season weekend, some playoff seeding at stake, but just very little, and really only one final spot to play for. The game that really ended up deciding that final spot was fantasy football team against Houdat, against Keith. That was kind of an interesting one. Keith offered a gift early on Sunday, maybe a little prematurely. As we look at the final numbers, the final score, it looks as if Keith could have started his entire bench in addition to his starting lineup and still lost. So I guess it's kind of like when kids give parents gifts that they don't really need. They just go, "Hey, thanks, man. So nice of you." But that was the final, that determined the final seed. And unfortunately, that slid a couple of other 7-7 teams out of the playoffs. But because of some other losses, it really did shake up the 4, 5, and 6 spot. The 1, 2, and 3 spots were fairly well locked in. I know Mr. Gloop got really excited about winning and being the number 1 seed. Even if he had lost, he would have been the number 1 seed. So would have gotten the bye either way. And it seems that Ian just, maybe he's from Ohio, didn't seem to want to win. Didn't seem over the course of the season to want to take that number 1 spot in the East. It felt like maybe he was uncomfortable being there. It's been a while since he's been playing fantasy. So he just sort of stayed right there dead even with Light Rail Coyote, with the captain, and decided at the very end of the season that he would just go ahead and play the first round of the playoffs rather than accepting that first round bye that the captain sort of stumbled into. Definitely stumbled into. But that's how it shakes out. So we'll see. We know that Gloop and the captain will continue on because they're not actually playing. And so we'll see who of the other 2 games will continue on past the wild card round, I guess you could say. But some interesting things of note as we look back over the season. If things of note are interesting to you, we had unprecedented scoring this year. First of all, we had an extra game for the regular season. That obviously added to it. And we added some additional scoring opportunities, especially for the defense. So we had some much higher season scores than we've ever seen in the past. We set a single game record and we set season records. And as it turns out, we know that Mr. Gloop came in at the top spot, just over 2,200 points, but we actually came in with several teams breaking the 2,000 point mark for the season for the first time in our league history. So that was kind of neat. Lots of points were scored, but not by everybody. So here's a little comparison for you. Mr. Gloop scored the most points on the season, 2,209. The fewest points scored over the course of the season was Mr. Keith at 1,670. That is about a 38.5 point differential on average per game, the difference between those 2 teams. Still scratching my head as to how Keith made the playoffs. But hey, you just have to win the game that's in front of you. You just have to beat the guy on the other side. You don't have to beat everybody or have the top score. So it worked out for him. On the flip side, points scored against, we talked about this earlier, and poor Alex Billy ended up ending the season with the most points scored against him. 2,100 at a clip of about 150 a game was the most scored against him. Now, the fewest points scored was previously Mr. Gloop, which we had talked about. But towards the end of the season, he slid out of that spot. And the captain, Light Rail Coyote, ended up with the fewest points scored against him, 1,787. The difference there is about 22.5 points per game. So not as big a difference in the points scored, but definitely something that led to Alex Billy's unfortunate, standing here at the bottom, he's actually the barrel scraper as we end the regular season, but still has an opportunity to retain his naming rights as he goes through the consolation ladder. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Another interesting point, not everybody joined the double-digit club. There were several teams that never scored under 100 over the course of the regular season. Several did. In fact, 6 teams scored under 100 at least once, most just one time. It's probably not a surprise that Keith scored under 100 3 times, given that he had the fewest points scored. But what is interesting is that he did not score under 100 the most times throughout the season. That actually goes to Light Rail Coyote. The captain scored under 100 4 different times. So how did he end up with a bye? Well, remember, Ian doesn't really want to win, so he's uncomfortable in that number 1 spot. So that was really how that happened. So that might have actually been a gift that Light Rail Coyote would appreciate. So that was kind of an interesting one. But unfortunately, what I found interesting is that poor Zach, and poor Alex Billy, neither one of them scored under 100 at any point for any game during the season. And neither one of them made the playoffs. In fact, they were out of the playoffs a couple weeks ago, or at least last week. So how does that happen? How does the guy with the most points on most games under 100 end up getting a bye? I don't know. You go figure that out. You do the math and figure out how that worked out. But anyway, I thought that was kind of interesting. Looking ahead to the playoffs, it'll be fun times, lots of injuries, lots of roster management. It seems as though it's going to come down to whoever can stay the healthiest, but maybe not just that, because as we look just over the past 4 weeks, just over the past month, the playoff teams, what have they done? Well, it's no surprise that some teams are scoring a lot. They've been scoring a lot. But it might surprise you who scored the most. But let's start at the bottom. Let's rank this. Of the 6 playoff teams, the team who scored the fewest average points over the last month is, no surprise, the lowest scoring team in the league. Keith, at under 100. He's averaging 95.5 points, probably due to that 51-point stinker that he had that really wrecks the curve, kills his average. But next in line, you might be surprised, is not the captain, which is what I thought, but actually Hale Murray. Ian slides just under Light Rail Coyote again, sort of giving a little more credibility to my theory that he just doesn't want to win and he's kind of taking a back seat. He's trying to stay just behind Light Rail Coyote because he doesn't want to sit in that top spot because he's a little uncomfortable with that. But 109.5 and Light Rail Coyote at 110. Actually about 0.4 of a point average less over the last month. So we'll see. Obviously one game can change all of that. But as we start sliding up into the top half, there's a pretty big jump. The next highest scoring team over the last month was fantasy football team, about 135 points. And then Mr. Gloop at about 140. So if you're paying attention and keeping track at home, that means that our often misnamed Aaron Chanka, who may have a new name as of this moment, is actually the highest scoring team in the past month at 146 points a game. That's probably a little nerve-wracking for the team that has to play him in the first round of the playoffs, but we'll see. We play each game on its own. So as we look forward, we'll see. Will trends continue? Will those with the fewest points overall, fewest points of the last month, will they end up just taking a quick exit, or will their teams overachieve, or will their opponents underachieve? Keep watching as we look ahead to our first round of the playoffs.